Hi, I'm John Blackburn, and this is Entertainment Matters. This is a podcast for people who make live entertainment happen. I talk to people from across live entertainment and beyond who have interesting, useful perspectives on how we can think about our work and how we put it into practice. You'll hear longer form interviews along with shorter analysis episodes where I pull out ideas from the conversations and explore how you can start applying them in your own work. Today's guest is Jayne Curry. Jayne is head of talent development for Don Casino in the US, co-owner of Black Box Booking with her husband Steve in South Florida, and has been an extremely successful professional entertainer herself for 23 years. In this conversation, Jayne tells us about her journey, what it takes to put cruise ship acts together, and why feedback and brand can matter as much as performance. Please enjoy this conversation with the fabulous Jayne Curry. All right, fantastic. So, Jayne, thank you for coming to talk to me today. Now, Jayne and I have known each other for a long time. She got me fizzed up famously on Haribo on one occasion, which I think resulted in me having like a direct red line, didn't it? Right down the middle of my, yes, I did really.
50% suntan.
50%, 50%, 100% intensity on one side of my body. So that's enough about my suntan. Jayne, tell me, who are you and what do you do?
I am Jayne Curry. I am entering into my 23rd year as a entertainer, professional entertainer myself, having worked on ships myself for 23 years as a guest entertainer. But since 2017, I have been sourcing, developing, mentoring, and selling entertainers to a partner company out in the States called Don Casino. They're probably, if not the biggest US-based talent agency that provides entertainers to the cruising industry. We have been predominantly finding, up until recently, European acts, but for American brands, when they reposition to Europe for the summer season. That's been the large bulk of the work. My husband, who is a professional golfer by trade, also has joined me in this business. So Clarity Entertainment, as it was in 2017, started with 4 entertainers. He helped me to develop that. And last year we had 35 entertainers. We also own a company in the United States called Black Box Booking, which is a talent agency based in South Florida, which sources and provides entertainers for the retirement communities, the homeowners associations, country clubs, and small theatres in South Florida. My husband predominantly runs that business. I perform there also. And earlier this year, we amalgamated Clarity Entertainment into Don Casino. So now I am the head of talent development for Don Casino.
Absolutely amazing. Thank you, Jayne. And yeah, I sort of foresee our conversations mainly focusing around the sort of act development and the cruise ship world, but I'm looking forward to your insights over all of the other things that you do. And am I also right, just to check in on whether I've got my facts right here, am I also right that you did, is it a couple of years ago, you actually did a qualification in sort of production?
I got a master's in live event design. Yes. During the pandemic, I went back to university, 20 years older than every other student in the class, with a 2-year-old child, and did a master's in live event design. So that focused on, some of the production elements of live entertainment, but also on a little bit of the theory behind it, and sort of live event creation, how to hire the people that are right for your events. And it was very much targeted towards my specific businesses. So the course allowed me to study in light of what I was doing. So it was directly pertinent to what I do, which is great.
That is amazing. And just out of interest, what was it that triggered that that study at that point? Because the reason I'm asking is that you could very easily have not done that and not invested all that time and energy into having to do all that and juggling the family things and everything else that was going on in the world at the time. And you were already very successful and you would have continued to be successful. So what was it that that led you to do that further study?
I think it was three three factors. Firstly, during the pandemic, I found it like I'd lost my sense of identity because I wasn't performing. I didn't feel the need to sing on Facebook Live or to put one of those digital cash cans out. It wasn't a financial choice. It was a needing to feel like something more than just a mum, because I always had been. And my son becoming 6 months old directly coincided with the start of the pandemic. So that was very much a learning process for me. So like, where do I fit in? Who is Jayne Curry now? So it was that. So I started looking for a job, accidentally found the college course, thought that it was based in Bolton, which is where I live, but it wasn't. It was affiliated by the University of Bolton, but the campus was a 90-minute drive away. So I commuted every day for a year to Wakefield. The second reason I did it was because I've always, especially since working in America, felt underestimated and talked down to by people that know more technically and musically than I do. And this is something that has followed me from the very first cruise I ever did, when the orchestra talked to me not particularly pleasantly because I didn't know my charts very well. And as I've learned new skills and gone into other fields of this industry, being the newbie in those places has always been difficult. And I've found that, especially so as a woman, when working in a predominantly male environment. Not feminist, but I've just found that. And so I wanted a seat at the table, basically. I wanted a seat at the table. And it wasn't until I got to the end of the course that I realized I was going to have to build my own table. That was also fine. And thirdly, I think the main reason I wanted to do this particular qualification is because when I did my BA honours 25 years ago, I never felt like I got out of it what I had as the potential to get out of higher education qualification. I felt like I had gone to the wrong institution. I didn't realize when I got my A levels that I could actually go through the clearing system to scale up to a better course and not just down when you don't get your grades. I got much better grades than anyone anticipated. And so I'd always felt like there was a part of the education journey that was unfinished for me.
Jayne, yeah, that's amazing, and thank you for that. And it's so interesting that not just in these conversations, but in talking to just other people generally in our world, in our industry, we all kind of arrive at wherever we are in quite different ways, don't we? And so some people perhaps some people might have got to where they are through attending a bunch of institutions and getting a bunch of qualifications, but then maybe feel that they have missed out on a bunch of other experiences. And I think it's I really think it's incredible that you did that, because you didn't have to do it. It's just it's really fantastic. Anyway, thank you for telling us about that. And actually, whilst we're talking about things a little bit in the past, what was it that has sort of led you to the work that you're doing now with Don Casino and this sort of act development type stuff? So you mentioned the fact that you are a performer, and that for a long time performing was exclusively what you did. So talk to me about that. How did you go from from finishing that first BA qualification to where you are now?
So I'd been at sea for quite a while. I started at sea myself when I was 24. So, but it had taken me a really long time to get to a good place with my career. And you specifically have been one of the benchmarks people that I've spoken to all the way through my career, where anything great happened, I'd call you and say, I've just got a full year worth of work with P&O, and I've just got my first gig on an American line. But it took me a really long time. As you know, you've been part of this journey since the get-go. So when I then finally could just work for Royal Caribbean and Celebrity, then I got an exclusive deal with Celebrity, and all these things I would call you up and go, oh, this great thing has happened. And you'd be like, oh, I knew it was going to happen for you. Great, great, great. But it did take me a long time, 13 years. I've been at sea 23, it took me 13 years to get to the place where I actually wanted to be. And I'd been approached by someone who was working at Don Casino, who knew me. He'd been a cruise director historically, and he knew me and knew my act at Celebrity. And he'd said, like, there's no one better qualified than you to find and source and develop European acts. And I turned him down several times because I thought I was being disloyal to my current representation when I did that. Then found out that the representation I had might not have felt the same way about me. So when I put it out there that I may have been interested in that, and I remember the exact day that we decided to go for it. It was February the 11th in 2017. We were having breakfast with this guy in his apartment. And he said to me, "You should put a showcase on. I'll come to the UK. I will watch the acts you put together, and we'll take it from there." And between the February and the April 27th was the showcase, I think. The 17th was the day that I started the company. I had to get together like 8, 10 acts, put a showcase on in the south of England, find a band for it, build a program for it. And I remember going backwards and forwards with the technicians and the bands over and over and over again because it was a completely unknown thing to me. So that's how it started. He asked me and I started the journey. And after that showcase, he took 4 of our entertainers out of 8, I think, or 10. And I'll never forget the first time he called up to tell me he'd sort of ascertained a booking for one of the people that I represented, who you happened to be living with at the time, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, one of your housemates. And I called him. I think he was one of the first, if not the second act that I ever called and said, "We've got you a booking on a ship." And I felt like Simon Cowell saying, "You're through to boot camp." It felt like, like I'd been able to give someone something. And the best feeling about that was being able to bring people together that I knew was sublimely talented, that I knew had the capability of doing the great stuff that I'd been doing. I was so grateful for what I'd had at sea. It was a phenomenal experience, a great journey. I wouldn't change a day of it. But those people didn't have to spend 13 years getting there because Don Casino were already here and the lines we were dealing with were already here. So I had the opportunity to take these people from not doing it at all to doing some of the best work that there is at sea. And that was like the main motivator for me to be able to do that. And having the experience of having done it myself, which was, every single step on the performing ladder to get there, helped me help them, and helped me to use all the skills I already was applying to my own job, but also then I had to learn a whole new set of skills because in effect I was kind of managing people, which as a solo entertainer you've never had to do. So that's been an upward trajectory for me, learning the politics of all the personalities.
Yeah, wow, that's amazing. And that does lead us quite nicely into what I wanted to ask you about next, which is you mentioned how you felt when you were able to ring someone, as it happens that we both know, what it was like for you to be able to ring them and tell them that they could have this great opportunity.
Yeah.
So as well as that, why is it that why is it that you're doing what you do now? What does it give you that you didn't have before? Or, what is it that's sort of driving you to do this now beyond going out and doing all the great performing that you were doing and so well?
Yeah, I think my why has evolved. Like the why in 2017 is not the why of 2025, but the 2017 why was very much sort of dual aspect of that. The first and foremost was I genuinely wanted to afford people the opportunity to experience some of the great things that I'd experienced as a result of a life at sea. And some of the people I knew that I could help, I always use this as an analogy when I'm working with acts. They were baking the cake, but they were just putting the ingredients in the wrong order. So they had everything they needed to make themselves successful at sea, but the ingredients were in the wrong order. If you're baking a cake and you put, the flour and the sugar in before you beat the eggs and and put the butter and whatever together, if you do it in the wrong order, you'll get a cake, but it won't be a great cake. It'll be a hard, lumpy, rotten, soggy cake, but it'll be a cake. And I just felt like having had all this experience, I thought I could help them bake their cakes. But the why now is kind of different because having my son late in life as I did, I was almost 41 when he was born. That's doing this job very much has allowed me to step back from the travel and to be more centrally based. And up until recently, when we have amalgamated the businesses and therefore my job has got way bigger, it allowed me the flexibility to work my life around my son, which was a big deal to me. And I'm fortunate in that respect that Daniel, who was the gentleman that asked me to start the business in the first place, had been so firm and so adamant and pushed me so much to do it, because if I hadn't started it then, it wouldn't have been earning me enough money to take a step back in my career when I did. Also, as well, having the company as a limited company helped us hugely through the pandemic, because if I'd just been a sole trader working on ships, I don't think I'd have been able to get any help through the pandemic either. So yeah, but that very much the creative why was to help people bake the cake, very much.
Amazing. Well, seeing as we're in the cake, let's keep talking about the cake for a bit, if that's all right.
Yeah.
So when you mention acts, artists, performers having the right ingredients and putting them together in the wrong order, give me some examples. What would be, not people examples, but just some examples of what are some of those ingredients, and what are, even if they're completely made up ones, some examples of putting them together in the wrong order.
Okay, so working on a cruise ship specifically is one of the most unique disciplines in the entertainment industry, because people are not invested in you particularly. They get on a ship for a holiday and they expect an entertainment product, but they're not 99.9% of the time booking the cruise because you are there. Like if they were coming to see a show on land, they would book a ticket or they would go into a venue knowing who the performer was going to be. So they go to the theatre because they're in the middle of the ocean and they've got nowhere else to go. So that's, top and bottom of it. So becoming a guest entertainer is you don't know me to you like me or you love me in 45 minutes. So that is a journey. That's a specific set task that someone, from the minute they walk on stage, people start to make first impressions of you. And when you leave, you have to try and take people from you never met me before to either giving you a standing ovation or stopping you in the buffet, asking for a photo, following you on social media. And that's a really short window of time if you think about how long an artist at a pop concert has to do that, or someone who's produced an album it's 45 minutes, not a long time. So taking an audience on that journey is, I kind of worked out for myself how to craft that. But like I said, my journey's been an extended journey. It's been a long time. So I started off at the age of 20 working in the holiday parks, and then I went out on the working men's club circuit with a band. And then I started as a solo act doing that kind of thing. And then I got my first cruise at the age of 24. But I think I employed some of those early learning experiences into my cruise ship experience. Now, the industry's changed a lot since then. So there's not a lot of places for people to hone their craft before they go. So they need a little bit more help and preparation. And like, you will know the circuit in London better than me. I've never really worked down there town, as you cool kids call it. But I've worked a lot more in the northeast. And
You have, however, put on more gigs in London than I have. So let's just, yeah.
maybe produce more, but you've certainly gigged more. But so in that respect, I think I came to it from a different point of view, because I'd already had to learn how to hold an audience's attention that were not invested in me. So they are not at a holiday park. They are not in a working men's club. They are not invested in who's on stage. They're waiting for the bingo. They're waiting for Rory the Tiger. They're waiting for whatever else it is they're waiting. And so already from being the age of 24, I was fascinated with the idea of certain other entertainers that I'd watched that could take an audience and have them in the palm of their hand in the first 45 seconds of a show. And like, there were 2 or 3 artists that I just looked at from being very young and thought, like, how do I get that? How do I get to be that? And over during my first professional singing job, which was, I worked on the holiday parks, and I also worked on P&O North Sea ferries from Hull to Zeebrugge and back every day for 4 months. I worked with another male singer in the group, and he kind of taught me how to build a set list. And even in sort of in the cruising environment, especially 6-star luxury lines, which couldn't be more different to a ferry full of soldiers, lorry drivers, French school children, it's still the basis of how I build a set today. So I kind of looked at how he did that, and I created for me like a working model that meant that wherever I went, I could create this framework. And when I took out material or choices or stories or whatever, I could replace it with something of equal impact, so that it was almost like a frame that you could put things in and out of. And that kind of became how I worked and how I built my own show, and had done that. And then going forward, when I started to work with baking other people's cakes, that's kind of what I would do. I've made a graph, basically. So I made a graph of level of impact, and what the song choice was, its level of impact, and where it marks on the graph. Because even in a 45-minute show, audiences are, especially if English is not their first language, which is a big deal in international shipping, you have to give them mental breaks. You have to give them time to stop concentrating, to either have a laugh or take a breather or stand up and dance, whatever. So I kind of worked out for myself how that would work. And going forward, that's what I've kind of done. So one of the examples I would give you, without sort of pointing the finger at any particular entertainer, is that the getting to know you part of the show is super, super important, because they have to become invested in you and your story straight away, because you've only got 45 minutes. And one of the new entertainers I took on at the behest of Don Casino a year or so ago had been saving her really interesting, super impressive story about herself till just before the final song of the show. And I didn't realize she was doing it until she sat down and literally wrote her script out of what she'd been saying and how she'd been doing things. All her songs are at the same impact level, which, again, like I said, there's no light and shade here. Everything is like an 80s rock anthem. There's nothing for anyone to take a mental breather with here. But also, your very best story, you've only just told them before the end of the show, and you've told them that that's why the show is called what it's called. And you would think like that would be 101. To someone like me, I would think, oh, of course you would tell them the best bit at the beginning. But for people that have never done it before, that's not necessarily, an immediate reaction to something, immediate, thought process. So it was literally just a case of pulling the show apart into its 8 pieces, its 8 song choices with links, moving them around, and then taking out one of the middle section, replacing it with something that allowed the audience to do this for 5 minutes. And it made a massive difference in that instance.
Yeah, that's incredible. And I don't think you've ever told me about that sort of model before, although I guess in the back of my mind I was
Because that's
aware
what's
that.
paying my mortgage, John. That's why.
Sure, don't give away. Don't give away any more. Don't give away any more of it.
I'm not showing you the graph,
Yeah.
but I'll tell you the graph. You ain't getting the graph, but yeah, only the Don Casino actors get the graph. But yeah,
that's all right. That seems reasonable. Yeah, and it's interesting that I remember seeing I don't remember what show it was on, but I remember watching like 2 comedians, like 2 big American comedians interviewing each other. And one of them was saying to the other that they'd been hosting some big, like Live at the Apollo or some big showcase, multiple act thing. And one of the sort of newer comedians had come on and asked him, the night was going really well, and sort of said, oh, well, what, any advice? What should I do? And he was great. He just went, yeah, whatever joke you normally close with that gets the biggest laugh, tonight you need to open with that. And they didn't do it, and apparently they flopped. And it's like, yeah, that's it, isn't it? That's like you with your sort of model and knowing the environment so well. That's someone who knows the intricacies of that very specific environment, which you might think is the same as any other gig or show that you might ever do. But as you've so clearly explained, because you only have that 45 minutes to do that whole journey. Yeah, that's amazing. They're very lucky people that are getting that sort of mentoring. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Jayne. And so you've constructed this model of how it works. And these sort of different levels of impact and the different sections and the journey to take the audience on. And yeah, what else is important for people maybe to understand about building that kind of a show for that specific situation?
So artistically, like what I've always recommended to entertainers is that they are not too self-indulgent with material choices, because I don't know if your listenership are aware of the differences between cruise lines. They are literally like hotel chains. So you can cruise on anything from Travelodge to Shangri-La and in between, It's that. It is. You can be on a very lively, family-oriented, full of excitable cocktail drinking Americans like Carnival, or you can be on the Ritz-Carlton yacht and then everything else in between. And some of the bigger luxury lines, and there's lines with big theatres, but different clientele, only Brits, predominantly Americans, and they're really, really different. So you've got to do your research. Don't just assume because something was a hit in the UK that it was a hit in the US, even if, like, for example, when I first started out on ships, I was including 2 songs in my show that the Americans had never heard of, and another one was they knew it and they loved it, but didn't know my version. I still do that same version now. It's Shout by Lulu, but they know Shout from Animal House, the movie. So their version's slightly different, But it doesn't matter. I do a slightly different version, but like having that knowledge is important. And then I used to sing When You Tell Me That You Love Me by Diana Ross. And Diana Ross is a massive, massive artist in the United States, but that song was not a hit there. Arguably, it was her biggest hit in the UK, but it was not a hit there. And a lot of the Americans came up to me after the show saying, I've never heard that song. I didn't even know it was Diana Ross. Now, the Filipino and Indian crew members backstage loved it. They were like, oh, I love her. I love her. So she was a big hit in the Philippines. She was massive in India. But that particular song wasn't a hit in the US. Also, Think Twice by Celine Dion. Not a hit in the US. You have to do your research. You have to. And even if it's been in the Billboard charts, how long's it been in the Billboard charts? What was around it in the Billboard charts at the time? Like, was it in the Billboard charts 2 weeks after I Will Always Love You by Whitney Houston, which everyone's going to remember, but they're not going to remember the 1 week that song was number one in the US charts. You have to do your research and not be too self-indulgent, because you have to look at who your clientele are. So I have a relatively similar set list, regardless of whether it is Travelodge or Shangri-La. I never really changed it that much. I changed the approach to it. So I changed some of the chat. I changed some of the introductions to those songs. And I always had, especially because of the shape of this graph, things to switch out just in case that were the same impact level. So if I was going on a ship, like I used to do a lot on island cruises, it's disbanded now. It doesn't exist anymore. And that was like a 3-star budget cruise line. It was bought out by Thomson, and then Thomson were amalgamated into TUI. So you could say it's similar to Marella. I think Marella is a much better product these days. But Island Cruises was known for its entertainment, but not much else. Like the food was not amazing. The accommodations were not fantastic. But people who cruised there knew that. They went for the entertainment. But it was very much it was a 7-day voyage. It was very port heavy, only 1 sea day. They wanted entertaining immediately. And I was on night number 2. So they get on board, they have a welcome show, and my show would be the night straight after that. So you've got to get in straight away, and you had to hit them quite hard immediately with that. So knowing your audience, doing your research on your product, where you're going, itineraries make a massive difference. This is something that a lot of acts don't consider when they're new. If your product is an American product, for example, or even a European one, MSC, Royal Caribbean, and that's going out of Barcelona, it's going to be full of Spanish-speaking guests. So less chat, more singing. But if it's a British product that's going out of Barcelona, it won't be. It'll just be Brits that have chartered a plane. So do your research on your cruise line. Do your research on your itinerary. Even if you're joining halfway through, where did your itinerary start? Did it start out of Amsterdam? If it's starting out of Amsterdam and it's doing the British Isles, it's not Brits. It's because Brits don't want to go around the British Isles, especially not, the only Brits that go around the British Isles are the P&O Brits. So you've got to do your research on your products. It's really important. And a lot of actors think they can go and roll out the same thing over and over again. You can roll out the same thing, but your approach to it needs to be amended. You need to do your research on the source of like the passengers, the itinerary, and on the material and where geographically it was a hit. And those things are really important.
That's incredible. And even though I've spent obviously a lot of time talking to you about these kinds of things and thinking about it myself and was sort of tangentially involved, I'd never thought about any of those things. That's great. I mean, that's amazing. So the level of research that it is possible to do to give yourself the best chance of getting a good result on a given cruise. And can we talk a little bit about how to describe it, like taking feedback at that point? Because you said something super interesting at the start of that part of conversation. You said you talked about going on and discovering that the Filipino and the Indian crew loved the Diana Ross tune and knew it really well. And then you mentioned about, was it Think Twice? That hadn't been a hit. Yep. Now, for you to know that now, you've become aware of that somehow.
Yeah.
And then obviously you've chosen to respond to it in a particular way, haven't you? You've made changes or at least taken it into account somehow. So could you talk to me about that? What is the the importance of, and B, how do you get useful feedback once you've got a gig, on a ship? Who do you need to be listening to? What kinds of things do you need to be paying attention to so that the second time you go and do it somewhere, it's even better?
So my unique selling point, I would always say as an entertainer, was always that I worked harder than anybody else I knew. And that was because not just on stage, but I've always believed that 50% of what you do on a cruise ship happens off stage. And again, because it's very unique environment, because most times you do a show in the UK, even if you stand around and talk to your audience afterwards, you don't see them again. They leave, they go somewhere else. You have to spend the rest of the voyage with the people you've been entertaining. So they have bought a piece of you for the week. And if you don't like that and you spend your time sitting in the cabin, which I know acts that do that, don't expect to be top of the list for the rehire. Especially with luxury lines, it is even contractually written in luxury lines, stipulations in the handbooks. Every cruise line's got a handbook these days of how they expect you to dress, how they expect you to behave, that you will host dinner tables, that you will be seen to be socializing with guests, you'll be dressed appropriately in public areas. These are all things we have to go through with every act, with every new line they go on. Now, I always did that anyway, because I always thought, well, if I'm there anyway, I might as well be out and about, being omnipresent. I can't even think if there was any one particular act I ever watched that did it. I don't think I did. I think I just kind of worked out for myself that to me, it's not rocket science, that if you are chatting to someone in a bar, a passenger, and they've said, I really enjoyed your show, that you could then say, do you think you could tell someone about that? Like, if you are filling out your comment card, as it used to be at the end of the cruise, like a questionnaire, a survey, could you mention me? It's the first time I've ever been here. I'd love to come back. I've had a great time. Do you think you could do that? That would be great. Now it's an online survey. Almost every cruise line sends out an email survey at the end of the week. And a lot of them have what they call EMS. So it's like or not an EMS, NPS. So it is, I can't remember what the abbreviation is for it, but it's like a point score system where they've got to try and get to 100 to get a perfect NPS score, but that's over the whole cruise. So every department has their NPS rating and they've got to get in gold, green, platinum, whatever, silver. So NPS is a big deal. On all cruise lines, they all use it now. But to get your name mentioned in it means that it will pop up in the system. When anybody's looking through the entertainment directory, when they look for something that occurs more than 10 times or something like that, it might be something like stinky toilet or, amazing chocolate cake or Jayne Curry. And I worked out that to get Jayne Curry to pop up in that system meant that I had to work. So I would go around the ship, I would go to cocktail hour, I would get up and dance with the band, I would sit with the old lady who had no friends. I would go, not the old, who's travelled on her own. I would go to the martini bar and cheer the guys that were doing the flaring. I would offer an extra show. And that's how I started offering extra material. Then I realised that doing that was helping everybody, not just me. So it was helping the cruise director, which meant it helped his NPS score. So if this whole thing is the whole cruise has got to get to 100, that's not one department. That's entertainment is one department. So as an entertainer, I've always believed that we could be part of the overall cruise's success, not just the entertainment department's success. And again, it's not rocket science. If you help people, they in turn feel more obliged to help you when you're in a situation that you might need help, which, I never did anything to get anything back, but it was always helpful. So I started to help the shops. I would wear their jewelry on stage and promote it. I started to go to the Captain's Club, which was like the loyalty scheme. Where the regular cruisers would have a cocktail party. I'd turn up as a pop-up guest. I'd sing there. I'd sit and have cocktails. I would dine with passengers. So you're getting feedback all the time from the guests. And then in return, you're saying to them, would you mind writing this down in the survey at the end of the week? And so when I did a transatlantic crossing and Jayne Curry got mentioned over 120 times in one cruise, that's when things started to change for me. And the brand were like, this person's having an impact. So I do the same thing with my act. And as you mentioned in the sort of the pre-show notes, I've told you before, this is called currying, which is basically how I've gone from doing what I've done and then recommending, not enforcing, but recommending to my entertainers that they think about how going the extra mile might impact them positively. So it helps them get feedback from passengers. It's a numbers game. The more people you see, the more likely they are to remember you, the more likely they are to write it down. But also, if you can have a positive impact on someone's vacation, if you have a job that makes people happy inherently, isn't that the best job in the world ever? You're not a what they call traffic warden. You're a singer. What you do makes people happy. So and also as well, I always found like with the department heads, with the cruise directors, with the hotel directors, especially senior officers, captains, if you're doing something that helps their job, if it helps their life, makes their life better and easier, it inherently makes your life easier. And it's not rocket science, but some people are really funny about only doing what they're contractually obliged to do. And that's okay. But out of my 35 entertainers that I amalgamated into Don Casino, mine were the ones that worked the most in the Europe season. And I think that's because a lot of them were going the extra mile and offering more. I do. I just think that.
I don't think there's any question about that, Jayne. I think that's really incredible. And one of the most interesting things about that for me is I think that if we sort of abstract it out a tiny little bit, I just think that is the same anywhere in entertainment, probably anywhere in any career actually. But it's that idea of having a perspective and a care and consideration for more than just the 45 minutes you're on stage, isn't it? Like being open to perhaps your job and your role in that moment being greater than just, not that there's anything small about performing or creating joy. That's a big deal. But to take on a little bit more care and responsibility for the whole thing that's made it possible for you to then go and, entertain. I think that is an attitude that, I think the whole industry, not just the cruising side of the industry, the whole industry, we'd all do better if we were all happier, just kind of helping out a little bit,
It's like a wedding, isn't it? If you think about it, if you're in a function band at a wedding and everything's running behind, or they need you a bit earlier, or someone's not turned up, or like I remember singing at a wedding once. The one I tell the story when people thought they booked Jane McDonald and it was me, and I turned up. And I remember singing for 45 minutes at the beginning of the ceremony, and the bride was 45 minutes late for her own wedding. And I'd sung almost everything I had to sing. And I was still going. And in the end, the songs were like going from You Are the Wind Beneath My Wings and like Love of My Life songs. And then it's like, Think Twice. I'm singing like Think Twice to the groom, and he's laughing. It's like, you've just got to dig in and just like be part of it and be part of the team. And that again, like this industry is like, my husband's been a professional golfer all his life. It's not a team sport. Very rarely do you play in a team. And you have to like disregard everybody else's thoughts and feelings, and it's about staying in the present. And that was very much the model that he sort of had to emulate. And I feel that whilst we're both in performance related professions, and I think that's why we understood each other's drive and need to do what we did, they were very different in the respect that, in my opinion, even though I am a solo entertainer and I don't work as part of an actual group, or I have a band in the US that I work with a lot, but they do still sub out, as they call it over there, dep them out. But we feel like a group, and that's great. But inherently, you are a solo entertainer. If this is a lot of the issue I have with some of, I wouldn't say the old guard, but some of the people that were lucky enough to get the contracts in the early days of, the glory days of cruising, where they were all being flown business class and they were all in balcony cabins and they were all eating in the Queen's Grill on Cunard. And, those days are gone now, especially since the pandemic. This business is totally unrecognizable from what it was 30 years ago. And even when I started 20 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, and I think it was at its peak for me in my career, was maybe about 10, 15 years ago. It's different now. And if you want to be at the top of somebody's list of, suggestions, or the person they're going to reach out to book, what's going to make you more valuable than the next person? They want a team player, that's for sure. These people don't want to be getting earache from the rest of the departments on the ship saying, this guy keeps coming to guest relation complaining that I'm giving him enough towels or whatever. Sometimes you've got to take one for the team, but not everybody's from that background. Not everybody did the working men's clubs. And one of the things that I've found to be really different with some of the entertainers, I said, like, I've kind of taken them from here and put them straight in at the top. That elevation sometimes comes with a distinct lack of gratitude. And that's not, I feel like, there's a lot of sort of woke sayings these days that I don't necessarily identify with because I'm old. But I do think when people talk about love language or basically stuff that makes your heart sing or make you positive, for me, it's like, it's gratitude. Like I've always pride myself in thanking the people on the ship that gave me the great cabin, thanking the band, taking them for a drink, tipping the waiters, taking time to get to know the name of the cabin steward. You think these things don't matter. They matter. They really matter. And they matter to that person who then, that cabin steward, 5 years' time, may end up being the chief of housekeeping. And this is genuinely has happened to me in my career where I've met a bartender on the ship who's now the hotel director. And that person's like, Jayne Curry, I know her, give her a sweet. And that has literally been like the journey for me. And I do think that gratitude and showing gratitude and being humble, no matter whether 1,200 people just stood up and cheered your name, still showing humility for me. And there are entertainers now, which undoubtedly are super, super talented. And if they left my agency and went to work somewhere else, they'd still get work. But I still think that the thing that's missing from their show is an element of humility, because it isn't there. Because at the end of the day, they are not Elton John and they're not Beyonce. They are still a gigging act on a cruise ship. And when that person gets off the ship and goes to another cruise ship next time, what is it about that show that's going to stick in that passenger's memory? And I just think the element of humility and showing and being real with people, gratitude, it's just so underrated in entertainment.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you. I remember even in my much more limited interaction with those kinds of things, um, thinking again about the team player thing. I remember when I first started hosting the little kind of trio gig in the Crow's Nest bar on a couple of the ships, just as part of the work that we were doing on those gigs. I remember like the shock and surprise on F&B, food and beverage department's face when I took the poster for what the drink offer was that day and put it next to the drums so I could talk about it. And again, knowing a few of the bar staff on each shift by name, of being able to kind of get people involved and having it be a fun room.
Yeah.
Well, there's nothing in our contracts that said to do that. And in fact, it was a bit of a surprise,
Yeah.
I think for a lot of people. But yeah, actually, you know what? The thing about that for me was I feel like it might be the same for you. It's just a nicer time,
It's not
right?
rocket science. If you're in a nice environment with people that want to support you and that are on your side, if everyone's heading in the same direction, if everyone's walking towards the same goal and no one's doing this against you, it just makes the whole thing easier. It's just easier and nicer, like just nicer. And there's no need
For everyone, yeah.
Yeah, for the bartenders, for the passengers, for the cleaning staff, for everybody. It was the same with me when I worked on some ships where I couldn't get into the theatre because I didn't have any West End credits. So I sat down and chatted to the cruise director. I'm like, I'm storming it every time I'm on the ship. Like, why can't I get out of the bar? Like, why am I always doing these shows in the bar? And he said, because you make us £4,000 of extra profit every time you're in the bar, because the passengers come in and because the bartenders like working with you and you promote the bar. And so now we can't put you in the theatre. And then I had to think about that. And like, I might be directly contradicting myself here now, thinking, well, is this then hampering my progress as an entertainer? If I'm doing this, if I'm being nice, is being nice in this instance holding me back? And then I realized it wasn't me. It was the company I was working for. So I take myself out of that environment and go somewhere else where they don't employ you. Like I owed up mine. I was exclusive with Celebrity for 6 years because they took amazing care of me. Very good care of me. They don't hire acts based on their gender, their genre, their experience, their credits. If you can go in a theatre and take the roof off, they're going to fill your diary. That's all they care about. And I found my place. I found my happy place at sea there. 1,200 seat theatre, 7-piece orchestra, but nice guests who paid a bit more money. The food was great. Generally just really, really good experience all round. And I realized that I wasn't devaluing myself by being good and kind and helpful to the crew in that situation. That particular brand was devaluing me. That wasn't me. And I didn't change me when I went to the brand that did value me. I still gave a shout out to the bartenders. I still stopped to thank the guy who cleaned the theatre between the shows. I still bothered to talk to the staff in the buffet, and they would all come up and say, I'll come and see you at the back of the theatre in my break of my show, I'll come and watch you. I still offered to do shows for the crew, even though it was the same day as my main show and it was after midnight. I didn't change, my attitude didn't change, but the environment was better.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's incredible. And again, that takes a certain amount of self-reflection and sensitivity, doesn't it? Which not everyone has cultivated to the same extent that you might have done.
Yeah.
To be able to look at a situation, and on the one hand, as you were explaining about taking the feedback, perhaps on the selection of material, on the one hand, having the sensitivity and the humility to listen and to say, well, if I can change a little bit about how I do that to make the show better, the audience have a nicer time, and then me have a nicer time. And also having the sort of self-confidence, as it were, to recognize that this might be a thing where what you're doing actually could be great and the best thing ever with a slight sideways move. I think that those skills are also underplayed sometimes. I think that's
being open to learn. I think, like you said, when I went back to my master's, it was unfinished academic business for me. But also when I started that course, I went there only knowing how to use my laptop to online shoe shop. And all the other girls on my course were doing CAD drawings and Adobe packages. And I couldn't even change a Zoom background when I first got there. So I had the steepest trajectory. I also had the fullest home life because I had a 2-year-old who'd been a pando baby, so he'd never been left with anyone else. But I had an unquenchable, I'd say that even now, thirst for knowledge, because I've applied that degree course every day of my professional life since I graduated.
Wow.
And I wish I could go back and start it again, knowing what I know now, and go from this point. I would do the whole thing again tomorrow, going in from this point, knowing what I know now. And I think I could have got so much more out of it if I could have done another year. It would have killed me and my family. But at the time, because we were all taking jobs and whatever to get through the pandemic and trying to relocate to America and all that. But it was still the best thing I ever did. But the reason I'm saying that is that some people are, I think, predisposed to want to learn and better themselves and really open to it. I'm mentoring an act right now from the current roster at Don Casino. So even though my title is Head of Talent Development, and that means that the new submissions now come through me, I'm also responsible for the success of people that we have on the roster. So it's important if they're getting feedback that comes back saying, these people, their numbers are dipped a bit, or we didn't feel they hit the mark so much this time. It's my job now to sit with that person and say, in this instance, this vocalist got like a 9 out of 10 in, like the person who reviewed him said, got 9 out of 10 for vocals, but maybe just a 7 for the chat. We think it could be worked on. So they've sent me the show. I've gone through it with fine-tooth comb. And like I said about baking the cake, he had all the ingredients there. I literally switched 2 songs. And he came up with something he didn't even realize he'd done. And I said, if you repeat that 2 or 3 times throughout the show, you've got your own little theme thing that's going to go through. And I think sometimes just seeing it from an outside point of view, but his response to the fact that I've gone to him and said, we think, we might be able to help you if you're open to me working with you, which was absolutely not me saying there's a problem with your show. He's still getting bookings, but let's get him more bookings, let's get him to the top of the wish list. And that's what he wants. His response was to me was, I can't believe you've taken the time to go through my show like this with a fine-tooth comb. This is like rocked my world today. Thank you so much. I can't wait to implement all this. I wish all acts were like that. They are not, because inherently as entertainers, we are wearing our hearts on our sleeve when we go on stage. And the most vulnerable an act ever is the minute they walk off stage. It's not the time ever to go up to someone and say, that was wrong. Or the worst thing anyone can ever say is, how do you think that went? The passive aggressive, especially when there's other artists in, watching you, and they come up and go, how do you feel your show went? It takes a lot to go, actually, I think it was all right. But for people to be open to the suggestion. Now, it's happened to me a lot in my career where people have come up to me and said, I'd like to talk to you about your show. A very famous household celebrity in the UK was on a ship with me, and he wanted to give me notes on my show. And he told me this immediately after I left the stage. And I took the time to sit and listen to him, and I took on board what he said and made the educated decision not to implement that. But there are other times, and there are two pieces of advice I was given when I was very young. And they've stuck with me ever since, and I still implement them now, and I use them when I mentor other people. In essence, what I'm saying is, if you are open to the suggestion that somebody might know something or have a piece of advice or may have perceived something from the outside that you might have missed, it's not a slight on you or your show. It's not a negative response to what you've given. It's somebody trying to help you get yourself to a better place. I think, it's got to come from a good place, from that person in the first instance. But, when I'm mentoring people, the first part of the contact that you make with someone and saying, like, I'd like to talk to you about how we can make things better, is the hardest part of the conversation, because you're automatically then insinuating to someone that what they're doing isn't right. And that's not necessarily the case. Being open to new knowledge, I think, is the secret to constant growth.
That's fab. Before I move us on a little bit, you mentioned that there were two pieces of advice that you got early on that were useful and you still think about. Would you be happy to share what those were?
Yes, one of them has an expletive in it. Are you okay with that? You can
I
bleep me out.
love. No, I'm not going to. Go for it.
Yes. I turned up to the Royal Concert Hall in Glasgow completely unprepared. First time I'd ever worked with a live band, to realise I was performing for Celtic Football Club's Player of the Year award, all the Celtic football team, the mayor of Glasgow, everything. I called up my friend. Oh my God, this must have been a mistake. I was 24. Like, what are they doing? Why have they booked me? I'm opening the show. I don't know what I'm doing. He said, Jayne, you don't get shit overnight. If you weren't shit yesterday, you are not shit today. And I've never forgotten that. And it's basically, be confident in your own ability. You're here because you deserve to be. If you were good yesterday, you're good today. You don't just get suddenly rubbish. And that's always stuck with me. And then there was two people that said the exact same thing to me when I was younger as a singer, because I've always had a big voice, always been like a belty kind of singer. And both of them said the same thing. They said, like, you've got this great voice, you can, this range and this power and this energy. Just think about light and shade. And it wasn't them saying anything other than to be impactful sometimes, like I do implement now in my own graph, you need to pull it back a bit sometimes. And I think sometimes people go into a show at one level of intensity and they maintain that level for the whole show, and people can't concentrate for that long. The impact starts to wane because people can't cope with the constant level of intensity. So light and shade has always been massive to me, not just when I grow a show, when I perform a whole song, when I think about changing material up, especially because as I've got older, my voice has evolved, my stories have evolved, and I've still always kept that at the center of everything. Where's the light and shade in this show? Both musically, with humor, with the stories, with the volume, light and shade, the contrast always.
That's so great. Such a, real, thank you. You started talking about a moment ago, the mentoring aspect of what you're doing now and through Don Casino. So and in very general terms, what is it that separates, would you say, the people that get the most benefit from those conversations that you have with them compared to people that get some benefit, but you think, if they'd just done X, Y, Z, they could have really taken things on?
I think it's quite simple, really. It's whether or not people are receptive to change or receptive to another person's opinion. And the stark difference between those that are and those that aren't. I'm not necessarily saying that it will automatically lead to success listening to somebody else's opinion, because sometimes our show is the way that show is, it isn't going to change no matter what you do, because that's that person and maybe that's where they're at. And I've always thought that there was space for everyone. It might not just be where they were at that time. Maybe we've got to find somewhere else for them. Because brands evolve and bookers evolve, new bookers, new brands, new concepts, age groups, like, whatever, itineraries, like things change. But if you are not open to the suggestion of help, or, I don't want to put it in such a a term that makes it sound like that person is not doing their job right. It's not. It's more a case of a lot of the cruise lines have scoring systems, and one in particular, they score out of 10, and you've got to score an 8 or they won't bring you back, right? They might give you another chance if you come in at a 7, but if you need to be a 9 or a 10 regularly to be at the top of their list of bookings. If you're an 8, a lot of part of what they want me to do at Don Casino is get the 8s up to 10. So they're already nailing it. But it could be, I think it's a case by case basis. It really is. It could be that they're nailing it on stage, but not off stage. Could be their attitude is not great. Could be, you've got to have a call with them, see where they're at. Maybe the brand isn't right for them, whatever. But at the end of the day, you could have the best piece of advice, and I don't profess to know everything, but you could have the best piece of advice or the best course of action to help someone. If they're not receptive to it, they're not open to it, it's falling on deaf ears, it's a waste.
Yeah. And thinking about moving, well, actually, we should, just for anyone watching or listening to this that is completely unfamiliar with that world, in order for a performer or an actor to have been taken on by you, or now by Don Casino, they're already at an extremely high level. And then you're also talking about people who are then scoring very well in whatever their environment they've been placed in. So there's no question that all of these people are really excellent acts and performers. But what kinds of things make that difference between an 8 and a 10? What kinds of things? Is it the stuff you've already talked about the, the off the stage stuff, or what do you find generally speaking is helpful?
I can only say this from my point of view. I can't realistically come to it with like a research background of like I've studied this and these are the statistics from this cruise line, because I did stay with one cruise line for a long time. That helped me because I knew the client base, I knew the staff, and staying in one place really helped me. But it also does limit people's career, because you will get to a certain point where everyone within that brand has seen you before. You're not going to get booked back. So for me, I always wanted to have a family. So, it all ended in an okay place for me, and I'm fortunate like that. But if you ask me within that brand, what would take someone from an 8 to a 10, I would think that it was really important to know like what we've said before, recapping what we've said before, knowing your demographic, your client, like simple things like bothering to go to guest relations, so to the cruise director, and say, can you tell me the breakdown of nationalities on the cruise this week? So if you're on a ship out of Barcelona, like I say, in the summer, you'll get Americans, but you might get 500 Spanish speaking guests, which sometimes you've just got to understand that they're going to walk in at the beginning of your show and they're going to leave after 15 minutes when they realize you're not Spanish. They just will. And then you've just got to work on everything else. But forewarned is forearmed. Knowledge is power always. Going and asking, who else have you had this week? Who went down great? What do they seem to be responding to? Have you had another girl singer on this week? Has she done any of my set list? That's also important. Going like, comics are harder still, like a comic following another comic. It's really hard to say, did he do this joke? Did he do this joke? So I guess making sure that your show is unique and that you can switch it out and that you can pivot. That's one of my colleagues' favorite words, pivot. If you can pivot, that's going to help you because no two gigs are the same. No two bookings are the same. No two audiences are the same. You have to have the ability to be malleable a bit. And I think that, like, if you are really set in your ways, no, this is and I had an act that I represented for a while that absolutely point blank refused to change the show, regardless of the brand they went to. And that was their decision. And that was up to them. I don't think it's the secret to success. I don't. I think you have to be able to pivot.
That was very interesting as well, Jayne, what you said there about going to was it entertainment director, did you say?
Yeah, or guest relations.
Guest relations.
Yeah.
So going to guest relations and asking those questions, because you're actually, I know that you will be fully cognizant of this, but just for everybody else listening, you're doing two jobs there, aren't you? The first thing you're doing is you're getting some information so you can tweak how you're going to do things, or at least be aware of the environment you're in that week. What you're also doing is signaling to guest relations that you're interested in doing a good job. You're creating a relationship straight away, a positive relationship straight away, aren't you, with another department? And so I find that kind of thing very interesting, how something that you could say that as a piece of advice to someone, say, oh, you need to go to guest relations and ask X, Y, Z. And somebody might think, well, there's nothing I can do about that in my show because it's my first blah, 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 excuses. But actually, it's not just getting the information, is it? It's also establishing that relationship, you know?
Yeah, with other departments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you. So if someone isn't quite at the stage, perhaps, where they'd be coming to you or Don Casino or what if someone's not quite there yet, but they're interested in doing that kind of work, what are the top things you would say they usually need to do to get ready for that kind of work? In the current environment, I appreciate it was different 15 years ago. So
Mhm.
these days, what do people need to do kind of before they approach you?
Okay, so when an act submits to Don Casino, they usually come through the submissions email, and they might say, I want to perform a blah, blah, whatever they send, doesn't matter what they send. What I need is a 3-minute promotional reel with the strongest material in the first minute of the promo reel. And within the first minute, evidence of that entertainer being able to talk to an audience, relate to a crowd. The 3 minutes needs to make very clear what the show is about. I need 2 show titles for each show, and I need 2 set lists. And we take it from there. And then there always will be a phone call after that. An entertainer needs to have a clear idea of what their 2 shows will look like, because we do get approached sometimes by people saying, I would like to be a guest entertainer. I'm thinking something along these lines. Can you help me? And I've done it a couple of times. It's incredibly time consuming. That was more the job I had before when I was at Clarity, because it was in my interest to develop an entertainer from scratch. I did that a few times and I had the time and energy to do that then. Now it's more a case of come to me with at least 75% of what it is you're planning to present, and I'll help you put the other 25% in the right place. Yeah. These days, shows tend to sell more when they're a concept. So a theme or a title, like it can't just be like my favorite songs or songs from my granddad. Once of a day, just Jayne Curry was enough for someone to book you. Now it would need to be something like, for example, in Florida, I have to have a different title for every show I do because I'm having to reinvent myself. I'm like the Madonna of the United States at the moment. Every year I've got to come up with something new. So each of my shows has a title, a tagline. So Jayne Curry, I am what I am. Jayne Curry Balancing Act was a poster with me balancing the kids' toy and a pan and a sheet music and wearing heels and like, how am I doing all of life? And then the third show is Jayne Curry's Big Night Out, and the fourth show is Jayne Curry's Bigger Night Out. And so each one of those with the poster, whatever, gave an idea of the energy they were going to get in the show. Was there a theme? Was there a tagline? These days, acts are expected to come with a lot more in advance. They are. You're going to need screen content for LED walls, sometimes projector walls, but generally LED walls. You have to have musical arrangements for 7-piece orchestras. Even though some ships, like some cruise lines, are now going to tracks, you also have to carry tracks. You have to carry everything you need for your first show in your hand luggage. These days you have to, because the bags get lost so much. So things have really changed and evolved. I'm happy to get people to the point where they can then submit to me successfully. The show needs to exist. Even if you've gigged it, in your local pub or whatever, it's difficult for a cruise line to take a gamble on something that they don't believe exists already. In the same respect, it's a chicken and egg situation, because where in the UK as a performer are you getting to film a promo with a live band? Because we need it. We need a promo with a live band. 8 out of 10 times it needs to be with a live band. If it's not, it's got to be so great that we can envisage it, and you've got to send me your charts and I got to look at them. So yeah, you've got to come prepared these days. Because as you know yourself, like there's not as much great work on land anymore. So the jobs, even though there are more ships coming out, there are less jobs since the pandemic because they're cutting back. They're less well paid. Groups especially, it's much harder for them because they don't want to give the cabins anymore.
Wow.
Or the flights. So groups, we've seen the bookings drop a lot. So you've got to be something different. What I would advise someone to do is go to look at there's a big 4 or 5 agents that do a lot in the cruising industry. Don Casino is one of them. Jonathan Blackburn International is another. Zoe Tyler Entertainment. go to some of these websites and look at what the acts are doing. Watch their promo. It's not all great, don't get me wrong, but get some ideas. Go and see, oh, they've got 3 or 4 of this kind of act, so that might be popular. I think maybe since my master's as well, researching stuff has become sort huge to me now. When somebody says something to me, I always ask them, where'd you get your information from? What's your source? And I think it's because I've dipped back into academia as an adult. It's like, where's your reference for that? Where's your source? How can you back that up? How can you verify this fact? And so, because my mum is the queen of Google and Facebook, and Facebook says it's right. Well, this act's on Facebook saying they've got 30 cruises. Yeah, but it's on a barge in Manchester Ship Canal. Do your research. So, research, research, research.
That's fab. Thank you. And we didn't talk about it much in this conversation. Maybe there'll be others in the future, but you did mention about in your role, sort of developing ACT and taking on the management aspect for people, the politics of it, and dealing with so many different people and different personalities. So, what would be something that you would say we could all do to be working better together? Because I have this thing where, and you've talked about it actually when you were talking about having that bigger picture perspective, helping F&B, helping the entertainment director, all of that stuff. So I guess along with that, what could we all be doing at producers, managers, bookers, the whole thing? What could we all be doing to work better together so that everything can get better for everyone?
That's a really huge question. But I think my answer to it would probably be quite basic and fundamental. Listening to each other is really important. Hearing both sides of the story. Something I think I've worked out for myself over the last 12 months as I've evolved as a person is that everyone's got their own truth. Everyone's got their own version of the truth. It doesn't mean that you're right, they're wrong, whatever. So just trying to hear where other people are coming from, I think is really important. And where I sit right now in my career, still a performer. I'm an agent, and I'm dealing with the cruise line. So I'm seeing this in, from 3 different perspectives a lot of the time. And it's really important to hear out everyone. And I think the one thing that's tried to stick with me throughout my entire career, even if it sometimes means swallowing your tongue or taking a deep breath, is try not to burn bridges, because in this industry is way smaller than people realize. Way smaller. When I look back now to when I was a Haven mate 25 years ago working at Blue Dolphin, and I look at the people that were my peers around that time and where they are and what they're doing now, some of those people are now running multi-million-dollar companies. Some of them are not. But, I've been really as careful as I can be to burn as few bridges as possible. And there are people that I prefer not to work with again. That's my own personal feeling. Not everyone's going to love everyone. I know I'm not everyone else's cup of tea. But try not to burn bridges in this industry now, because the roles, especially in the cruising industry, are really transient. Everyone moves around a lot. But I think in anything, in any industry, there's an element of promotion, isn't there? There's an element of people moving up through the ranks. The whole notion of what you're doing is to help people grow, right? So inherently, if you grow, you're moving. And so these people are going to move. And if you annoy, upset, throw your toys out the pram over the things that really don't matter, I'm not talking about like disregarding your self-worth at any point and letting people walk all over you, but just sometimes you just got to suck some stuff up. And I think I've done that more than most in my career. I think I put up with more stuff than maybe I would now at my age. But when I see some of the younger folks out there making their first foray into the entertainment industry and the demands that they're putting on people and the things they're asking for, and I just think this is going to be a short trip for you. I think just not burning bridges is huge.
And a small extension of that question maybe is, if you could click your fingers and have a few changes in your bit of the industry happen, what would you really like to see change? Where do you want to see things heading?
So can I say selfishly and unselfishly? So selfishly, I would love people to understand in the cruising industry, especially, to be more understanding about working mothers. because when you become a mother and you are a guest entertainer, you have a huge decision to make. And, you may have to literally contemplate walking away from everything you've built because you now have a tiny human that you're responsible for. But there's a bit of a double standard in the industry there, because officers and the such like can travel with their families and sign other people onto ships way easier than guest entertainers can. And if you think about it, a happy, contented performer is a better performer than someone who's had to make a tough choice to leave their child at home. I'd love to see some industry-wide changes about flexibility with family and work. In the profession, not just necessarily entertainment, but I know that in theatre, because I'm part of a Facebook group where it's all mums in the theatre industry. A lot of them are West End mums, and they're talking about job shares and helping each other with childcare. I spoke about this when I did my master's recently. I was asked to go back and do a presentation in front of an organisation called OISTAT, which is the scenic designers, costumiers, technicians, sound, light, all these people, big confederation in Europe, and then the American version is called USIT. And I was asked to speak at their conference, and one of the things I talked about was this untapped resource of mums like me that have been in the entertainment industry for 20-something years, find themselves at a crossroad with all these skills and all this knowledge, but a tiny human. And how do we go forward with that? And I'd love to see this industry embrace the knowledge, expertise, and, because I know how hard it is to be a mum now, the fierceness that comes from becoming a parent. My show's evolved. It's changed. I think it's better. I'm 2 dress sizes bigger than before I had a baby, but, it doesn't mean people can't relate to me. I've got a whole new story to tell. I've got a whole new perspective, and I would love to see the entertainment industry embrace working mums a little bit more. That's selfish.
That's not selfish, is it, Jayne? Because you're not talking about just you. That's a change that, that would impact, well, let's say 50% of the workforce.
Yeah.
So that's great. Carry on, sorry. And
I think
unselfishly.
Yeah, I think it's because it's like I know it would benefit me, so that's why I'm saying it's like selfishly. It's coming from my perspective, and there's a lot of people it wouldn't help. But unselfishly, the travel industry is tough these days. Traveling is tough. I've always felt like there's something missing in the industry that would mean everyone could talk to each other and make the travel element of being a guest entertainer easier.
Mm-hmm.
Some centralized information hub which would allow all agents and airlines and cruise ships to tap into geographical locations of people and make the travel less and the success more. That's the hardest part of the job. It's the hardest. I mean, I'm not a huge environmentalist, but it's the hardest on the environment. It's the hardest on people's voices. It's the hardest on families, on the travel. It's expensive. I think there should be something where we all sit down and work out, like, there's got to be somewhere where we can all just input this data and all share it. But then does that make my job obsolete? Is ChatGPT going to do that eventually? Is AI going to make the agent obsolete going forward? Because I think there's a lot of human elements involved in what I do. But, the actual person, the booker that's selling and buying and selling and buying, I just think it would be good if there was some more centralized information that meant that the travel was easier. Because it's brutal. It's harder than even when I was doing it. It's really tough now because the airlines are, like any part of the service industry, are less staffed, and bags get lost more, flights get cancelled more often. It's just tougher. And I think if we all got our heads together and sat down and worked out how we improve that, it would make a massive impact to the whole industry.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you, Jayne. Just very briefly circling back to your first, the one that you labeled more selfish, but I think everybody listening would see that it's not. Yeah, I guess that's very similar in a lot of industries, isn't it? Is we don't, or you do, but we as a collective don't appreciate the resources we're missing out on because we're not prepared to encounter some kind of an inconvenient admin or system change that could really unleash like an incredible amount of new, energy and ideas and resources, and thank you for reminding us about that. If there was one question, Jayne, that I was supposed to ask you, or that I should have asked you, what would that be?
What does the future of the cruising industry look like for guest entertainers?
Tell me.
I'd love to say I have a comprehensive answer to that, but I think it's changing and evolving.
Uh-huh.
I think there will be less call for your average standard entertainer. I think people are going to have to start coming up with new ideas, new concepts. The industry is growing in number, like the new ships coming out all the time. They're getting bigger, they're competing. Look at a model, for example, like MSC, how they've grown. Like it's interesting to people that are interested in sort of like the growth of the industry to look at them as a model and how quickly they're escalating. Royal Caribbean is still a massive company. MSC are going at like quite a pace. And watching how their entertainment needs are evolving as they're bringing out new vessels makes me realise that we're all going to have to start thinking bigger. We're all going to have to start thinking outside the box. And people that are in the industry now, and this is something that I've got to work out as a mentor, how to approach people that have been successful for 20 years and doing great and getting bookings that maybe now are not getting so many bookings. I'm going to have to go back to them and ask them how they plan to evolve. How do you plan to make your show relevant to this next generation of cruisers, or to the vision of the people at the top? Because they may not be as keen on the middle-aged white man as they were. This is a big thing that we're finding now. How can you change and evolve? How can you grow and not be left behind? And how can I help with that?
So just sticking with that very quickly, if that's okay. And I appreciate that it's an evolving situation. You said it's not like you feel like you have sort of all the answers about this, but would you talk more about what thinking outside of the box or evolving might mean? What kinds of things might that involve? For example, are you talking mainly about material? When you talk about concept, what's an old concept? What could be a new concept? That kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. And there's certain genres that I think have been done to death, and there's certain genres that are fashionable at the moment that won't stick around. I think that, like I said about titles and like themes to shows, like people have been coming up with ideas of a theme to how to link all the material together. People are coming to the theatre now wanting to know a bit more and this is because there's an app on every ship. There's a digital marquee outside every theatre now, turning over all the information for the day. And some cruise lines send out before you even get there who the entertainers are going to be, and people Google you. People look you up on YouTube before you get there. This happens even to me in Florida. I've looked you up on YouTube. I've watched your videos. So I guess it's about, as much as I hate like the fact that we have to rely on social media so much these days, but it's about like, what is the whole concept of you as an entertainer? Let's say it's a solo act in this instance. What is your branding? What is your unique selling point? What makes you more bookable than artist number two? Why am I booking you over this person? How can you elevate your brand? As a very quick analogy I'd love to share with you. Will take me one moment. I saw a sports psychologist years ago when Steve did, and he talked to me about becoming a Mont Blanc. And he said to me, what makes you a Mont Blanc? And I'm like, I don't know what you mean. He said, well, we've got 4 pens. We've got a pen we find in a hotel. We've got a Bic Biro. We have a Parker pen, and we have a Mont Blanc. They're all pens. They all do the same thing. What makes the Mont Blanc more valuable than the free hotel pen, the 25 pence Bic, the £20 Parker pen, or the £400 Mont Blanc? And it's its perceived value. We perceive it to be more valuable because of its branding. Yes, it's great quality. They don't compromise on the standard of what they deliver, but it's got a brand. They don't discount. They don't go on sale. You buy them in specific outlets, retailers. Chanel is very similar. You can't buy Chanel perfume in 70% of perfume retailers because they have to check out the place. And it's like, what makes your perceived value more more valuable? What makes your perception of your brand more valuable than the next person? And it was learning that took me from, actually, I think I'm more valuable than what I'm doing. And that's what helped me get into the American lines. I believe that was the turning point for me as a performer. What is the value of the brand of Jayne Curry? What is Jayne Curry? Can I sum it up in a sentence? Can I? And I think it's sometimes just taking a moment, not to throw as much stuff at the wall until it sticks. It's to take a really detailed look at what it is you're doing. How do we brand that going forward? How am I perceived online? How do I dress off stage? How do I communicate with my agent? How do I talk to passengers? What is my brand? Is my brand that, some people are that I'm going to be this wacky guy that walks around the ship with a backwards hat all week, high-fiving the kids? Is that my brand? Brilliant. You know, do that, brand that, commit to that. And I think these days, the acts that have got good branding, that have got good, and I'm not just talking about a logo on social media, I'm talking about like really working on what it means to have a good brand, are the ones that are setting themselves apart from the others. And I think that's where it's going to go. That's what I think. I think it's going to be about how many followers have you got? And I hate that. But, have you got followers on social media? Have you got a presence off the ship? Are you easy to communicate with? Will followers be able to follow you and then maybe book another cruise based on the fact you're there? I think that's
That's
where it's going.
that's fantastic. And on the brand thing, see if this makes any sense for what you're saying. But I don't remember who it was said it, but that idea. A lot of people do think that the branding is your logos and the color palette that you use on your website or whatever, don't they? But someone explained it to me a little while ago as being your brand is the promises that you make and the ones that you keep. So if you advertise yourself, if you put out the idea that you are the kind of wacky, zany guy that's going to be talking to everybody on the ship, but when you get on board, you just sit on the corner and you don't talk to anyone, that incongruence is going to cause a problem, isn't it? Is
Yeah.
that kind of what you're...
Yeah. I mean, that's an amazing way to think of it. I was thinking, yeah, absolutely. And I think that, it goes back again to 50% of what you do is off stage in that environment, in the cruising environment. 50% of what you do is off stage, and you've got to live up to your brand. If you come across on stage as likable, approachable, funny, and people come up to you at the end of the show and say, "You're so great, like you're the person I'd want to have a beer with." Like, let's go have a beer, and I do, and that's what I did. I would sit. Sometimes I would just want to sit in my room and watch Netflix and order room service. And on transatlantic crossings, when it was 8 consecutive sea days, I would wear myself out going to dinners and extra whatever, and I would joke about I'm either in bed in rehearsals or on stage. Like that's all I ever do, or in the shower. I don't do anything else for that whole cruise. But it's part of the bigger picture, and it's part of, sometimes you do have to work a bit harder. And I've seen acts come and go over the years that started in similar places to me, that did a lot of stuff that I did, that didn't end up doing what I did because they would deliver what was contractually obliged of them. And I'll just never be in that gang. It's just not my gang.
That's great. Thank you. Have you got time for a couple of short questions just to wrap up?
I do.
So, in all of the stuff that you've done, going from the Haven at the Blue Dolphin, I've definitely got that wrong, but that
No, you
sounds
haven't.
like the...
That's right.
Oh, was that the one?
Yep.
I suddenly got a flash that was the bar from the Police Academy films, but no, that's good. That's all right.
No,
So
where I started, you're right, Blue Dolphin, yeah.
So going from then through all of the point, which of course you still do very actively now, and all of this work that you've done in the sort of talent development and you're continuing to do in Don Casino, what so far would you say is the thing that you're the most proud of in your work so far?
Without a shadow of a doubt, it's probably my master's, because it continues to influence my career choices daily. It was the hardest 12 months for me physically, committing to that. It was the thing that changed me the most about how I thought about myself. There's a lot of our life that people don't see, like the behind the scenes of what it takes to make any of this life that it looks like we have, because we live in the United States half of the year, and this weekend we'll be emigrating, or we're trying a year out there to see how we feel. And there are pictures of my toes in the sand in Florida, and I am waiting on the confirmation to move into my beachfront condo, right? Sounds amazing, but you have absolutely no idea what it took to get to that place and how many hurdles I have jumped, even just in the last few months. And I think the biggest things I learned from my masters was to never quit, never, always to stick it out. I've never been a quitter anyway, but to stick it out. If you believe in something, commit to it 100% and go for it. And something else I learned that was really important is to be more concise. So I know today we've waffled for an hour and a half, but I have the penchant to be verbose in every way. And so now I'm less like that. So I'm more concise about what I do. And I think it helps me in every element of my career. But I am super proud of my masters. And I don't think everybody understands the benefit of it, but I do. It's changed our lives.
Amazing. And I just want to thank you for all the detail you've given and the clarity and the detail and everything you talked about today. And I might have to take some notes from you on being more concise. That would be great. Final question. As an audience member, what's your favorite event that you've been part of as an audience member?
I went to a gig a few years ago in Fort Lauderdale. My brother bought me tickets for Christmas, and I don't go to live events very often because it feels a bit like a busman's holiday. And I don't listen to music in the car because my whole life is surrounded by a soundtrack. So I went to see a split bill of Corinne Bailey Rae and Joss Stone.
Wow.
But it was in Fort Lauderdale. And the experience of seeing how these two acts that I thought were just kind of more sort of 90s, noughties, big deal in the UK, translate to an American audience and be part of it from their perspective was pretty cool. I think that was one of the best things. But I think, I'm just saying, as I'm saying that, I'm realizing it's probably not. But I went to see Andrea Bocelli in Lahatico, which is his hometown in the Tuscan hills, and he's built an amphitheatre in the hillside of his hometown, and he performs there once a year. And we went to see Turandot, which is the opera that Nessun Dorma is from. And sitting in the Tuscan hills at night watching Andrea Bocelli sing Nessun Dorma was something I never thought in my wildest dreams that Jayne Curry from Accrington would ever experience. So that was right up there. Yeah, definitely.
Jayne, thank you so much for all of that. I'm sure it's going to be super interesting for everyone watching and listening. If people would like to find out a bit more about you, where can people go to get some more information?
As a performer, it would probably be YouTube. My husband uploads videos of me a bit. I've never done it. He has. I have a website which lists all of my upcoming dates in the United States, and if I do add any cruises, which I hadn't planned to, but apparently I've just got a text saying I'm doing one next year, then that would be on my website. And you can Google me. I'm Jayne with a Y, Curry with a Y. And if you are interested in submitting to learn a little more about how you would be successful on a cruise ship as a guest entertainer, as we mentioned previously, come to me with at least the idea of what the show's going to be. Not with no concept, but you can go through the Don Casino website, and any submissions there will be directed to me. So if you are a budding, up-and-coming entertainer that thinks that they would love a go at sailing the seven seas, get your branding together and then send me an email, for sure.
Absolutely amazing. I will put all of those links, including the Don Casino one, in the show notes and in the description. Jayne, thank you so much. I look forward to talking to you again soon.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for your time, my dear.
If you enjoyed this episode, here on the Entertainment Matters podcast, you'll find a mixture of longer form interviews and shorter analysis episodes where I talk about how you can start applying the ideas from the interviews in your own work in live entertainment. And if you'd like to be notified when there's a new episode and stay up to date with the podcast, you can sign up for the Entertainment Matters Q sheet at the link in the description. Thanks for listening, and thanks for whatever you do to make live entertainment happen.